So the transfer window is now open and running, and I wanted to discuss 3 familiar names known to the Celtic fans. Before I get into that, please hit the subscribe button. Remember to like and follow, comment, all that good stuff, and I really appreciate you coming on board. Thanks, guys. So first up is Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain. Now, I know there is several people that don't want Alex to come back to the club, but they think that he is maybe, possibly their words, not mine, maybe a wee bit over the hill. But I personally would like to see Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain at Celtic for another year. And I'll tell you why, not just because of what he brings on the pitch, because I did think we've seen glimpses of that last year. I think of when he came on at Ibrox, I thought he did really well. The late goal against Livingston, a couple other wee appearances with Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain, I thought looked like his old self and the player that he once was. And, I think that there is still a player in there. As for off the park, I think that's where it really comes in. I think that's where he can really help Celtic. I think he helped Celtic with that off the park last season. I think that his experience, he's won Champions Leagues, he's won Premier Leagues, he has played in big matches, he's played for big clubs. Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain is an asset to Celtic, which is why Martin O'Neill brought him in the first place. This isn't a Juninho here or a Carlton Cole where they're over the hill and they're just coming up here for one last payday. Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain did contribute last season. And I believe, like I say, he did help the younger players and stuff. And I believe that Celtic got it over the line. Thanks to guys like him, thanks to James Forrest, thanks to Kieran Tierney, Callum McGregor, all these guys who have been there and done it. I don't think Celtic would have won the league without these guys. So I think Oxlade-Chamberlain definitely deserves another deal, in my opinion. Just a 1-year contract for another year, play a bit part here and there and stuff like that. At the end of the day, we've got nothing to lose. We're going to lose a lot of players, without a doubt. We've got nothing to lose by keeping Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain on for another year. And I think he'd stay if he was offered, because I think he really enjoyed his time up here last year, and I think working under Martin O'Neill is something that he'll probably cherish again if Celtic offer him the deal. Now, whether Celtic offer the deal in the first place, even if Martin O'Neill wants him or not, that's a completely different question, isn't it? We know that Celtic aren't known for, going for it whenever they need to go for things. They aren't known for getting business done early. They aren't known for really getting the job done whenever we need them to. But, like I say, I don't think there's much to lose on this one. We could probably just take the same deal as he was on and stay up here for another year. He's probably settled here for a wee while. His missus seems to love it, she's posting on Instagram with a Celtic kit on again and stuff like that. So they clearly enjoy the club, they clearly enjoy the city. So why not? I would keep Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain for another year. On to the next man is Kelechi Iheanacho. No, this is another one. I would keep him on, for what he contributed last year. The vital moment where he stepped up against Motherwell in the big controversial penalty decision, that took balls. His goal in the cup final, his goal. He scored loads of goals, he came on against Dundee and scored, and, the guy is there to score goals. I think he's the man. I think he's vital for Celtic. Now, the only problem with Kelechi Iheanacho is you won't keep him fit for a long period of time. But we need strikers anyway. Dyson Maida's going to move on. We need to get a striker in. So even if Iheanacho is a bit part player, he comes on 15-20 minutes to go, he's proved that he can do that. He scored against Hibs and done the same thing and stuff like that. He proved last year that he can come off the bench and make a real impact for Celtic. So definitely I would like to see Iheanacho stay on for another year alongside Oxlade-Chamberlain. I think that, again, the guy's got loads of experience. Premier League, he's played for Leicester, he's played under Brendan Rodgers, he's played for his national team multiple times. Kelechi Iheanacho is another experienced guy that is, is a real asset to Celtic. You look over the years here, right, and we look at guys like Joe Hart, we look at Kasper Schmeichel. These guys really, really helped Celtic when we needed them. The experience these guys brought in, particularly Joe Hart. When Ange came in and he had to make the big rebuild and stuff, Joe Hart was a massive, massive help to Celtic. I believe that off-field kind of impact is massive. I really do. And, I would more than happy keep Kelechi Iheanacho on, Would he be a first-team starter? Because Martin O'Neill was basically said over the last few months that you can't get Iheanacho fit. And to be honest with you, if that's what we get out of him, if we get 15-20 minutes out of him, but he makes the kind of impacts that he's been making, bring it on, man. Bring it on, because he's definitely a real asset to have in your team. So he would definitely be there for me. He's the best striker we've got at the club still. Currently, we've not signed anybody yet, but he's better than Johnny Kenny. He's better than Shin Yamada. And if we're counting Daizen Maeda striker, well, I'm not really doing that because he's merely a winger, isn't he? But, you know, he's still the best striker we've got at the club. But, you know, Callum Osmond has still got a lot to prove. He looks really, really good from what we've seen so far. But, you know, we've only seen him in glimpses and he does look the part. But Iheanacho is still the best striker at Celtic at the moment. So hopefully we offer him another deal. And then lastly, going on to Sriracha, who I really, really want. I want him back at Celtic. Boca Juniors player. I don't think he's got a future at Boca Juniors from what I've been hearing, the reports I've been reading and stuff like that. I don't think that he is part of their plans. Kieran Tierney he had a fantastic season last season, but we know that KT gets injured, and he was quite lucky last season. I don't think he was out much injured, didn't get much injuries and stuff, but he did come off most games, 15-20 minutes to go. Sriracha came on and he looked amazing, you know. I did say when I was talking about this a few weeks ago in here that, you know, Sriracha, I would imagine, would be thinking to himself, I might want to go somewhere where I'm playing, you know, where I'm my first team regular, and I've been reading reports about that as well, that he has asked Martin O'Neill for certain things. Apparently Celtic have made no contact with Boca Juniors as of now. That could always change, you know how it goes. But, you know, Sriracha is a real asset to have in your team, and I want Celtic to go and get him. And, you know, Kieran Tierney is probably going to be the future captain of Celtic. He's probably going to take on the role of what Callum McGregor's done. When Callum McGregor decides to move on. I don't think Callum McGregor will move on this summer. There's loads of people talking about that. I personally don't think that's going to happen at the moment. I think he'll do another Scott Brown, and he'll hang on at Celtic for as long as he can because he loves the club. You know, he probably appreciates everything that Celtic have done for him. Basically nourished him through a very young age, and he's came up and he's ended up becoming Celtic captain. And he's phenomenal. The boy is absolutely phenomenal. Last year, it wasn't his best season. People say he may have lost a wee yard here or there or whatever, but to be honest with you, I still think Callum McGregor's as good as he's ever been. Because, you know, the team wasn't great last year. The team as a whole weren't great last year. You couldn't really say that anybody was absolutely outstanding. You know, I think McGregor, Nygren, Tierney, Scales was decent. I think that they four were probably Celtic's best players last season. But at the end of the day, I would really like Sriracha to come back and push Kieran Tierney for that place, you know. And, you know, if, for instance, if Kieran Tierney does drop out through injury or tiredness or whatever, I'm more than happy for Sriracha to come in. You know, he's more than an ample replacement. He just everything he done, and, you know, full credit to him as well. You never really heard them moaning, coming out and complaining about how he's no starting or he's not getting enough game time, you know, and, you know, in the papers, or going to a journalist and complaining about stuff. He never done that. You know, he get his head down. He worked hard, and, you know, I would personally, if I was him, I would be saying to Martin O'Neill, you need to give me a lot more game time if you want me to come back here. And who knows what is even going to happen next season. You know, Martin O'Neill may change the system. You know, there's loads of people talking about that. Martin O'Neill, when he first came to Celtic in the year 2000 and through his whole reign, he loved a 3-5-2. You know, that was his system. And I know that was more than almost 3 decades ago. And, you know, times have changed and stuff. And Martin O'Neill has said that, you know, he's learning a lot about the game and stuff off guys like Sean Maloney and Mark Fotheringham these days. But I'm sure there's still a part of Martin O'Neill that wants to revert back to how he used to play the game, how he used to set up his teams and stuff like that. Whether that's formation or whether that's, you know, he used to love the big guys at the back, didn't he? The Bobo Baldys, the Johan Mjalbys, the Useful Harrens, the big burly centre halves that he loved, you know, to dominate, you know, strike forces and stuff like that, so that they didn't get too physical. He always loved a physical presence, did Martin. You know, he bought Big Sutton, he bought Hartson, these guys, you know, big, strong, you know, people in his team and that. He liked that, you know, he liked the physical side of the game and stuff. I don't think that's going to leave Martin O'Neill. And when you think about it last season, I don't think that Celtic were physical, overly physical in any way, to be honest with you. I don't think we were pushovers, but I don't think we were strong enough in departments, when it comes to set pieces and stuff like that. I think it did improve when Sinisalo became the goalkeeper. I think Casper wasn't great with cross balls and stuff, so I think Sinisalo is really good with cross balls. If I'm being honest with you, I don't really fear the ball coming into the box when Sinisalo's in goal. I think that he is quite commanding in that position. But Martin O'Neill might be looking for a different kind of direction when it comes to his centre halves and stuff. Carter Vickers, for as fantastic a player he is, he's brilliant at defending, he's great with the ball at his feet and stuff. However, Carter Vickers isn't the biggest of guys in the world, so he may be looking for somebody, Liam Scales is a big boy right enough, you know what I mean? But Liam Scales is another one that likes to play the ball at his feet and stuff like that. But I don't know. We'll be interesting to see what Martin O'Neill thinks next season. Will any of the players who, he'd really appreciated last season, will any of them drop out? Will it be a Liam Scales? Will Liam Scales maybe find himself on the bench next season? Who knows, man? Really don't know what's going to happen. Will, like I say, a lot of people's going to move on. Arnie Engels is going to move on. Nygren's probably going to move on. He didn't have the best of games the other day and for Sweden. Unfortunately, they get battered off Holland. Nygren didn't have his best game for what I've seen. But, I think that Nygren will be looking to move on, to be honest with you. After his season last season, he's had a couple of great seasons now, one in Sweden and one with Celtic. So, putting himself out there, he played okay in the first game for what I've seen. But I think that Nygren possibly might move on. I think Engels definitely will. I think Maida definitely will. But we'll see what happens in the future and stuff like that. It really is, apprehensive and what's the word I'm looking for? I'm cautious about what's going to happen next season. There is a real level of excitement. The World Cup is distracting us at the moment. But I think there is a lot to do for Celtic. I think that Celtic will get a lot of business over the line. Who knows when? Brian Wilson said, what was that, 2 weeks ago now? There's going to be a busy few weeks. I've not seen much happening. I think we've signed a young Irish boy, 16 years old, from over there and stuff. But, nobody that's going to impact the first team anytime soon and stuff. It's just obviously for the, the younger players, the younger development and stuff. But again, it's not even been announced that Mark Follingham and Sean Maloney have signed on yet. Apparently that's all but done from what I've seen. But Celtic just aren't announcing anything at the moment. I don't really know what's going on behind the scenes. I don't know why they're taking that. Maybe they're just deciding to take their time. But then they done this last year and, nothing ever happened really. We bought players bits and bobs and stuff. And I know that Brendan Rodgers wasn't happy with that, which is one of the factors why he moved on. But, there is a lot to do for Celtic. But me personally, I would try and get those 3 guys signed again. Oxlade-Chamberlain, Iheanacho, Sriracha. And I'd be more than delighted with those 3 signings. I really would. I'm not saying though that if we sign those 3 guys, that makes up for, we have to spend other money. We have to spend money. What Celtic are doing right now, let's be honest, they're waiting on the money coming in for Engels. They're waiting on the money coming in for Maida. Right? That's what they're doing just now. They're waiting for those bids to come in. That is what I personally think. I think that they're probably just putting out there at the moment, maybe giving people deadlines and stuff. Like Nottingham Forest are interested. Apparently, I think Fulham are interested. Apparently, Fulham are interested in Alistair Johnson. That would be a sore one to lose, AJ, because what a fantastic player he is, and he's shown that in the World Cup as well at the moment. Top player. We really missed him for a large part of last season. Even though Arajo did do a really good job for Celtic, I think that Alistair Johnson was also fantastic when he came in. And again, I don't think that we would have won the league with it. I think, all these wee bits and bobs, these jigsaw pieces all just came together in the end for Celtic. Alistair Johnson coming back and Iheanacho hitting form and Engels coming back, and it all just kind of fell together and, Celtic got the job done and stuff. But let's get those 3 guys in. I don't know what you guys think in the comments, whether you would like to see them back at Celtic. I think a lot of you would, especially Sriracha. I think that everybody is kind of sold on Sriracha coming back in. Iheanacho, I know, I think that Celtic fans, the majority of Celtic fans would want to see him come back in. As for Oxlade-Chamberlain, I think that might be a controversial one. I think some of you might be thinking, nah, I would like to see the money on his wages spent elsewhere, which I do understand, to be honest. It's not as if I'm sitting here going like, no way, we have to sign this guy. I just think it would be a good idea if Celtic did. And but we'll see what happens in the future, guys. It's there's no a great deal to talk about. I know we've been linked with players and stuff like that, but see, until something is concrete, there is no point me coming on here and saying names and and going down the whole rabbit hole, because one minute I'm reading about players coming in, and then the next minute, they're linked with somebody else and they're away. So unless something is absolutely concrete, I'm not saying nothing. There is various reports of various players at the moment, but I'm not going to sit here and waste my time talking about players who, more than likely won't come to the club. You know what I mean? There will be players who are linked with Celtic who eventually will end up signing. Look at last year with Balashawi. That dragged on for a long, long time. It ended up happening, and in the end, very towards the end of the window in the Rangers game, he came on and he was just awful that day. Wasn't the best of timings. If we'd have got him in early, who knows what could have happened with that boy? You know what I mean? Because he didn't perform well whenever he was in a Celtic jersey at all last season. I think about the game at Auchinleck, he was really, really poor. But look at Benjamin Nigren. We got Nigren in early, and he had a fantastic season. He hit the ground early, he scored all his goals. Loads of people still don't really rate Nigren. They think he's not the best player in the world, but a guy who scores over 20 goals for you from that position is okay in my book. I don't need him to be Maradona, Messi. I just need him to score goals, and I need him to create goals, and Nigren done that, and but I'm personally hoping that we do keep a hold of Benjamin Nigren. I'd like to see him at Celtic for at least another year. I think if he does stay on, I think he will score goals again next year, and I think that the price will go up. So hopefully Celtic are thinking that way. Hopefully Martin O'Neill is turning out the board and going, listen, Dies and Maida, you can go, because we almost let you go last season. You want to move on you go. Arne Engels, again, the last day of the season, the transfer window last season, Nottingham Forest made a huge bid, Celtic knocked it back. Arne Engels has bided his time, he got injured, but when he came back, he looked a real part. He scored that penalty against Hearts, and it took another big moment for him to do that. I would let Engels move on, but I would be really trying to keep a hold of Benjamin Nigren, to be honest with you. And I know that if somebody comes in with a huge bid, over £20 million, Celtic will bite the hand off him, definitely. And it's hard to say that would be wrong, because, he's had one good season at Celtic, and that I could be wrong. He could end up staying here and be dreadful next season. So, if a bid comes in for Benjamin Nigren and Celtic decide that they want to take it, I can kind of understand it. But personally, I would like to see him stay on for another year, build the team around McGregor and Nigren. And, another one I would really, really, really hate to lose, Alistair Johnson. I know I mentioned that earlier, but Fulham are linked with him. And, that would be a massive blow. If we did go and get, if somebody did come in and get Alistair Johnson, I would go and get Araujo, because another one who I was really impressed with last season. I know a lot of Celtic fans would want him. I personally don't think that Araujo would come if Alistair Johnson's still at the club, because, it's different with Tierney. Tierney doesn't stay fit and he can come off, and Sarachi will get his minutes. I reckon if Alistair Johnson's fit and healthy, then it'd be practically impossible for Araujo to get in the team. For as good as Araujo was, I think Alistair Johnson is a next level. And aye, that's just my opinion on things. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Thanks for watching. Remember, hit that subscribe button, all that stuff, because it is important to me. I'm trying to build this channel as quickly as possible. I'd like to get as many Celtic fans on board, and we can talk about Celtic. It's a big season coming up. We've got lots to talk about. At the minute, it's quiet. Like I say, we've got the World Cup. It's all quiet with Celtic at the moment. There is wee bits and bobs of stories coming out and stuff like that, but nothing is happening at Celtic at the moment. I'll watch this, I'll come off here and there'll be some big breaking news that I've not seen yet, but at the moment it's all quiet on the Western Front. But that's what I would like to see happen next season. Let's get them signed up, guys, and let me know what you think in the comments.